everyone hear me okay? Everyone hear me okay? Okay. All right. Thank you for having me. Good evening. Most people grow up knowing where they came from, surrounded by people who look like them, share their traits, and who pass along their stories through generations of their bloodline. That's not how I grew up. I was adopted into Taiwan as an infant by an older white couple. The man whom I would come to know as my father was stationed there at a now extinct U.S. military base. Upon my birth and subsequent adoption, my father promptly retired after 33 years of service to the U.S. Army, and we moved to Memphis when I was just a few months old. So I have, for the most part, been here ever since, which I think earns me the title of native Memphian. The story I struggled to know nearly my entire life was the story of me, of who I was, of who I came from, of the traits I shared with someone, anyone out there, of the stories told through the generations of my bloodline. And I took the lack of answers on all fronts to write my story with a subtext of longing, of guilt, and of detachment. Do I look like my mother? Am I susceptible to disease or a gypsy curse? Why can't I just be grateful for what I have? Why can't I just be like everyone else? Little did I know, at 44 years old, my story would undergo a dramatic revision. But first, the story I knew. It was the story that I deemed the true north for the compass of my identity. It was my origin story. Summer 1972. Julie, as the Americans called her because who knew how to pronounce her real Chinese name, was 18 years old, working on the U.S. military base in Taiwan. She had developed quite the crush on a young, tall, and handsome American officer, and after several flirtatious exchanges, a love affair ignited. For Julie, this was her first true love, and visions of her happy future with her American husband flooded her dreams. That was until the orders came that his time serving his country was up, he was going back home, back to America, back to his wife and children. Heartbroken and humiliated, Julie tried to rid herself of his memory, and later that fall, she realized that would be impossible because she was pregnant with me. He was long gone, oblivious to my existence, and she planned to keep it that way. Now, being an unwed teen mother was not an option, so she turned to the ample pool of potential parents at the military base, and soon an adoption agreement was made several months before I was even born. Julie gave birth to me on a Sunday morning in May of 1973, held me once, and handed me over to my American future. Now, clearly that story has been very romanticized throughout my life. The story I was told growing up was far more G-rated and devoid of details. And as I got older, the striking similarities to Madame Butterfly and later Miss Saigon were not lost on me. But as far as the basic plot points go, that's the story my parents told, and they were sticking with it. My parents were both in their late 50s when I was born. My dad died too soon when I was 12, and my poor mom never expected to raise a squirrely teenager by herself, especially one who constantly tried to overcome her identity crisis and abandonment issues through really bad decisions. She had her first heart attack when I was a senior in high school, which she squarely blamed on me. Her health had its peaks and valleys, but by my early 30s, the signs of dementia were setting in. The details of my origin story, told through the fog of her increasingly confused memories, became more and more bizarre. At one point, it was suggested that I was actually Mexican. I was okay with that. And she recalled fondly of how everyone on the plane fawned over the cute puppy she was bringing home from Taiwan. That seemed to make her happy, so I never corrected her. She passed away in February 2012, just days before her 86th birthday. With no one left to corroborate or dispute my vague beginnings, I did what any rational person would do. I turned to science. I had purchased a DNA test before, but considering the fact I bought it with a Groupon, I suppose I shouldn't have been surprised that the results were probably a combination of every single person that had handled this damp envelope that I sent back. I certainly did not see the Rwandan, Bangladeshi, or Ukrainian roots my results claimed. Only slightly daunted by that experience, I went for a more popular DNA test, and I paid full price. Satisfied that my sample would be relatively untainted, I sent off my vial of mystery and waited. Just enough time had passed that I was taken by surprise when I received notice that my results were ready. I immediately called my husband to my side. As I clicked through each page, learning that I am neither Mexican nor a highly evolved puppy, which was disappointing, I was, as I had always suspected, half Chinese and half English European. I also had a match. And as my husband and I looked closer at the tiny avatar thumbnail, there was no doubt that I had found a member of my birth family. After a series of emails, hundreds of text messages, relentless Facebook stalking, and several Skype sessions, I flew to California to meet in person for the first time my birth mother, my half-sister, and my half-brother. It was exactly like a scene from a Lifetime movie or an episode of Oprah. There were flowers, hugs, tears, and rolling cameras. I looked like them. I sounded like them. When I first walked into my mother's home, photos of me had already been downloaded from my Facebook page, printed, and added to the collage of family photos on the walls. We compared all of our similarities with wonder. We were all sarcastic smartasses. We were all allergic to penicillin. And when I told my mom that at the time I drank, cussed, and smoked cigarettes, she replied, beaming with pride, "That's because you are my daughter." And yes, that's exactly what she sounds like. It totally blew my mind to experience familial genetics for the first time as a middle-aged woman. It blew me away to hear my real origin story, which was far less romantic. And it also confounded me that I didn't feel any different. I guess I expected some sort of warm, cathartic force to fill my body with a newfound sense of purpose and self-acceptance of something, but it didn't. I felt the same. It has now been a year and a half since we found each other. We have celebrated a birth together, we have mourned a death together, and we have become a family. I realized that it's okay that I didn't feel any different because just like how my likeness was added seamlessly to the photo-framed lexicon of our bloodline on my mother's walls, I had always been there. And my origin story isn't who I am who I decide to be.